Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on this SCEA live roundtable discussion. Rick Whitmore, the host from last year's series of these, did a fantastic job stepping in to fill that role. And we're going to continue that tradition. There's so many important conversations we need to have right now regarding public education. And tonight we're just going to start off addressing some of the misconceptions that are currently being circulated in radical form. And so our topic tonight is going to focus on this radical misinformation being circulated and perpetuated and the harmful real effects that's having for real educators, students, parents, and really everyone. We have a wonderful set of guests to bring this in. And share their years of expertise, as well as hope if you feel free to comment in the comment section below um, with any questions you might have and insights you might have, just to have that dialogue and that discussion that's so important that we have an open conversation about these important issues. If you're watching right now, help us out by sharing this on different social media pages to help spread it around. It's just so important that those actually uh, working in education, connected education, speak up about topics, just sharing our truth and just let the public know who a lot of individuals are truly scared about some of this misinformation they're hearing, just to say, hey, here's what's going on in schools and then here's why this is important. But let's bring on our wonderful panel for our discussion tonight. We have Dr. Gloria Boutit and we have Miss Katie Harris with us, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Dr. Boutit, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Unmute.
Is really important. I am Dr. Gloria Boutit. I am the Interim Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of South Carolina, and I'm also a Carolina Distinguished Professor. And so my work involves looking at equity and culturally relevant pedagogies. Thank you.
I'm Katie Harris. I am an elementary educator of 17 years, and I know, and I am currently teaching fifth graders in Fort Mill. I have taught a variety of ranges and different students, and now I'm currently teaching gifted education to fifth graders.
Dr. King, thanks for joining us. We actually just got started introducing our panelists and who we are. So if you won't just introduce yourself and your tremendous background in education.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I'm Charles King. Sorry for popping in late. I got held up in traffic. That's my apologies. Been retired since December. I retired as a principal, but I have served as an elementary, middle, and high school principal at different times. Obviously, an assistant superintendent at another district, and I've also been elected to my local school board here twice. And believe it or not, as of last Monday, I found that I will be running unopposed for a term that will begin in this January. So I'll be going back on the local school board in January. But I'm excited to be here. 31 years in education, and still had a little bit of a flavor of it to stay active. And I visit schools a lot still, and looking forward to serving as a school board member to kind of keep my finger in the pie a little bit.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us, and excited about this conversation this evening. It's an important one. There's for whatever reason, it seems that the focus has shifted to talking about public education in not so favorable ways. And we all in education know there's many things that do need to be improved in public education, but the current conversation about what needs to be improved is kind of a false reality of kind of these radical ideas. And I was careful with naming this about radical misinformation because I think we got to be careful just about labeling anyone. These are the radicals, these are extremists, because that just becomes a tit for tat. So this conversation isn't about who can we blame for our current situations. This conversation tonight is about sharing truth and hopefully relaxing the public a little bit to clear up some misconceptions for whoever's watching this about what is actually happening in classrooms and what needs to happen. But let's just start off by defining some terms here. When we talk about radical misinformation, the things we're talking about are the book banning, the attack on talking about racial issues, gender issues, and this idea that somehow the word indoctrination gets thrown around everywhere. And that's what we're talking about. And so we want to hear from actual educators to just discuss that. We're joined by our other panelists this evening. Hey, if you just want to jump in and introduce yourself, we just got done with the introduction. So please go right ahead.
Hi, I am Shaquetta Moultrie. I've worked diligently and consistently with Dr. Boutte, and I love her. She's enlightened me on so many things, but also I've been in education for 8 years. In those 8 years, I've seen a lot, I've watched a lot, and I'm definitely ready to give some educators insight.
Thank you. All right. You know, the Golden Knights have this conversation. Please feel free to comment if you're watching this. We'd love to hear from you. Keep the comments civil. Keep the comments civil is what we ask, of course. But our discussion tonight, we're just going to have an open conversation back and forth without necessarily taking individual turns. But the first thing I want to bring up is just want to discuss in everyone's mind, when did this trend seem to get started of this kind of blatant, explicit attack, making educators the bad guys and pitting them against parents and creating this huge vision of a division between parents and educators. So when do you think that got started? How did it become mainstream? And do we see it ending anytime soon? If anybody wants to tackle that.
I know personally, at the beginning of my career, it wasn't nearly like it is now, as far as the divide and the feeling of division between parents and teachers. And I think a lot of that goes along with the correlation between respect of the profession of teaching. I know that when I was a child as well, like you, as students and as parents, looked at the teacher as the example of what should be taught. There was a trust level there of we trust the standards, we trust the teacher. And I think probably in the last decade, maybe it slowly eroded a little. And I think, of course, with COVID and having students at home more and having kind of that 2 to 3 years of flux in education really emphasized that divide.
Okay.
I think I started teaching in 2015. And when I first started teaching, I came in with the expectation of like teaching how I was taught, because I took some time off after graduating. And I think I kind of noticed it when it became the parents are always right kind of situation, kind of like customers. And I'm not sure. So it would be if you discipline a child, or if you said something, the children would say, well, she did, and it became you were targeting my child, or you. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've had to explain to parents, a teacher does not come to work to say, oh, I'm getting on Johnny today, or I hope Johnny does something because I'm getting on him today. But so it's been like that and I think that idea that there's no, we need to create a community again where there's the school, the teacher, the student, the parent, and we're all working together for the common good. And I think, like Katie said, that trust needs to be there again. Like, your teacher is there to teach you a set of skills that she hopes you can carry with you through life. And because as teachers, we come in every year with the goal of, I just want to touch one student, and so they can remember me and something that they learned from me, whether it be about life or about education, and take it with them forever.
I have to wonder too, Pete, if and I certainly don't want to go into the political aspect of it, but I think that gets driven in pretty severely by folks who are either, more far on the left or far on the right. Like it or not, that's the truth. But also in my experience, my last two principalships, I went from a very high poverty demographic, highest poverty school in the district, And then I went to another school and finished up my career at a school where it was the lowest poverty index, more affluent population and community. And it was interesting to study that dichotomy as to how the interactiveness or participation level of the parents was different from one school to the next. And it was also interesting to find that sometimes at the higher poverty school, much more faith was given to the school staff and administration to do what is supposed to be done. That's just kind of was somewhat of an interesting phenomenon to me, whereby the last school I finished up at, probably maybe 45% free and reduced rate. The parents were very much more acquisitive and would more readily ask, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Not necessarily in a negative way, but just were a little more proactive rather than reactive, I guess.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
I also wonder, I think some of it comes too from teachers don't have as much autonomy as parents might think that we have. And so it's kind of like if you're calling in to a customer service, you're mad, you're angry at the agent. We're the agents, and a lot of the things that come with policy and how things are done in the school, they just automatically go to the teacher when we're only following the procedures that were laid out for us. So I think a lot of the making us the enemy comes because we're the front line. So sometimes you have administrators who are willing to stop and take that bullet for you, but other times when the parent makes the first contact, it's to the educator, and we've only done what we've been trained or told is part of the procedural process to do.
And I think that was such a good point.
I like that comment. Yeah, I agree. I think that's an excellent point. And I see someone put in the comments about teachers are not treated as professionals. One of my colleagues at the University of South Carolina, Henry Trine, published a book and, speaking about teacher retention. And he says, the reason, what he found in his research was the reason teachers are leaving the field is not so much because of the low pay, but because of disrespect. And I love the analogy that you used, Shaquata, about you being the agent, the first person to get to. But teachers actually have been, teaching has been deprofessionalized in many ways.
Yes.
You also said something, Ms. Moultrie, that I vehemently agree with, and that is, I declare, and I don't think I ever had the wool over my eyes. I like to think I was a pretty astute administrator and had my finger on the pulse of what was going on in my school. I cannot think of one teacher who taught with or for me who ever came to school with the intent of wronging a child. And I think that's a common public misperception that my kid's being targeted. It's almost nobody intentionally loses a ball game. Everybody's, he threw the game. I don't think educators naturally go into a classroom setting saying, hey, I'm getting that kid today. I just don't.
Yes.
Right. A few things on that too. I think if you look at one thing I just want to ask y'all to follow up on that, is this issue of trust. It seems from my perspective, from my classroom in school, that parents with actual students in the classroom aren't so much against the teachers. It seems to be this is coming from individuals who don't have any students directly in the classroom at all. But I think overall, I really feel like most parents still like their teachers, and there's that relationship there. And I don't think teachers we don't want any parental involvement at all. I think parents like parental involvement. It's a discussion. It's a two-way street. So I think this whole us versus them kind of dichotomy is really coming largely from outside resources. And just to clear up too, I'm not going to certainly defend any educator who's in the wrong. There's an educator who has violated that trust, has compromised, and absolutely get them out of the profession. No question. I'm not going to defend that. I think what's happening is people using those extreme examples and trying to paint this picture that that's what's going on in our schools. And when we have real parents with real students and real schools for educators, I want to know from y'all, is this really something that you deal with in schools so much from a majority of your parents, or is it just kind of still isolated in reality versus the public perception?
What I have seen is I kind of walk that fine line of like, if anyone was going to be upset about a teacher, they could possibly be upset about me. But that's because I teach full history. I believe in including all my students. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. But that being said, I've never had a parent who's had any kind of issue with me. So I agree 100%, Pete. I think that once parents see the teacher and see the love and the attention and what the teacher is giving to their kids, it's not an issue. It's fear mongering coming from the outside. A couple really loud voices, possibly who do not support public ed in general, coming in and really trying to make people fearful of something that doesn't necessarily always exist.
Yes.
Also, Pete, if I may interject, you alluded to something I find quite interesting. When I've been on the school board before, I call myself a reluctant politician, and I mean that wholeheartedly. I hate that the word politician is in my vernacular, because that's not what I'm about. But I do encounter in my walk of life, I won't say frequently, but every once in a while, I'll have someone say, "Man, I'm sick and tired of paying all my tax dollars to a public education system that's failing. Why do I don't even have kids in school now. I'm retired. I'm not from here. Why should I keep having to pay school taxes?" My response to that is, when you go to the doctor, the nurse checks your blood pressure, don't you want that person to be proficient? When the plumber comes and fixes your pipes, when the electrician wires your house, when the mechanic fixes your car, and I give a multitude of vocational examples, don't you want those people to have been educated at the best level that we could possibly provide for them? And more often than not, those people say, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yeah. Because you all know we're all educators.
Right.
Our communities, our environment that we live in are only as strong as the educational system embedded in that. And I pay my share of taxes, but I've never complained about it, because I want the schools in my area to be as strong as they can be.
I want to piggyback on that, Dr. King, because educators pay taxes too. A lot of taxes, and none of us are in public education anyway, because we've been made millionaires. We produce millionaires, but we are definitely not paid millions of dollars. And at one point, I thought that people would appreciate us more after COVID and the kids being home for that year, because Summer Slide has nothing on COVID Slide. And so they should be more gracious towards teachers and the impact that we have, because there was a lot of nothingness going on during COVID when we did not have that day-to-day face-to-face interaction with the students. And so it would be great if the world would just appreciate what we bring to the table, because again, it's not because we're just taking the taxpayers' dollars and going home to our mansions and our families. We literally, when you're a teacher, you work 12-hour days that you don't get paid for. You take your work home to your family. The only time we are not working is maybe summer break.
And I think teachers need to have stronger voice and say that, say it in the vote and so forth, because this whole attack and vilifying of teachers is carefully orchestrated for political reasons that undermine public schools.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, teachers come to school and they give their best, and they're outstanding and they're amazing. And yet, they're under attack. And it seems as if people who think that maybe I went to school for K-12, so I have a right to tell teachers what to do. There's no other profession where people try to advise the professional on how to teach. teachers have been prepared to do this job. But I think one of the things that I would really say loudly is that teachers have to learn how to be more politically active and how to advocate for ourselves more. We have to do that. And, a lot of reports show that maybe up to even 30% or more of teachers don't even vote every year. And we have to get out there to protect ourselves. Otherwise, the agendas are being set by others who fully intend to undermine public schools. And we understand that public schools are the basis of a democracy. It's one of the few things that we have where we can have all people come together, be educated, and have the voices of all. And so that's been intentionally and systemically undermined. And I think we need to be astute at that. And I like what you said, Dr. King, about being a reluctant politician, because actually, teaching is very political. And we just need to learn how to use those politics to advocate for ourselves a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a distinction between being political and being partisan. I think partisan is when you are cheering for
Right.
either Clemson or South Carolina or whatever, and your other side's evil and your side's Saints. Uh, but political, we have to make changes how this stuff gets funded for public education. So any politician supporting public education needs our support. There was a huge, right before COVID in 2019, there was the all out May 1st. SE Fred and SCEA were supportive of that. And then November came and the same folks got elected pretty much. And that kind of hurt the movement. And I think politicians maybe realized, well, we can do whatever we want to the teacher block, education block maybe isn't there. And that kind of maybe led to some of the empowerment of what we're seeing now, this kind of just, all right, let's make teachers the bad guy then. I think there's a statistic recently, getting off subject a little bit, but 30,000 teachers currently were not registered to vote right now. So if you're watching this, or please get everybody registered to vote and vote for those who are public education, because the attack on public education is hurting those who really need these services most. Because if we're honest, we are all not trying. I want to bring up some of these specific myths that are being addressed here now to really drill in. I want to talk about some of these false myths. I want to talk about the term indoctrination and why this keeps being, kids are being indoctrinated. They're indoctrinated. That's just, in my years of education, 10, I've never seen any teacher indoctrinate students intentionally. And if I have, I would have a conversation. I think we all would. I don't think that's why we're there. But again, they take these extreme examples and make it that. But if y'all could speak to some of those false myths that particularly are being circulated now, the indoctrination that leads to banning books, and what the reality really is for people who might need to hear that.
I would say one reality, Pete, is that when we continue to take away the autonomy of teachers and not allow them to teach in a way that they have been prepared to do, that actually ends up in indoctrination. So we hear these current sound bites. And I'm going to say, in most lay people's and families' defense, they hear those sound bites and they run with them without even critically analyzing what's currently happening in schools. Teachers are given scripts, pacing guides, very little autonomy to make professional decisions on how best to teach their respected classroom of children based on what they know about those children. So that word indoctrination sounds scary, but to be frank and to be real, what's really going on in school right now, if teachers follow the scripted curriculum, that is a form of indoctrination that does not allow the voices of many people to come in, to doesn't allow for critical thinking and critical consciousness, which is really what we want children to do in schools. And so, I think we just have to recognize that this is coded language. So a lot of parents and even maybe some of the politicians themselves don't even recognize the indoctrination that currently happens. So you hear things like going back to the basics. There's no movement that focuses on, let's say, culturally relevant teaching or anything else that is not about academic excellence. But we're given a misperception that if we don't do it this way, the way that really indoctrinates, then our kids are not going to learn basic skills. We've had
Right.
generations and decades of children in public schools, and the trends have not changed, using the same methods that they're advocating. So when we think about culturally relevant pedagogy, that is not widespread. What is actually happening in schools is the exact thing that they're talking about re-implementing that has never gone away.
Yes.
I agree with Dr. Boutte on if it is indoctrination, it's systematic indoctrination because what they do with teachers, and especially as a history teacher, Katie can probably relate. We don't choose what to teach about
Mm-hmm.
history. They give us a pacing guide, and we've just kind of, and maybe not all, maybe just seventh grade went away from support documents in which it's verbatim what this it is essential for the students to know. For me, I try to avoid that by teaching the hidden history. Like I teach the whole history. This is what is in the book, but these are the other sides. And me and one of my colleagues that I taught with formerly, who's telling the story and who are they telling it to, and whose voice is missing, because all of that is important. You can't say that we're indoctrinating kids when we're giving them a slew of information and having them to find their own truth, because that's what critical thinking is. You're taking a mass amount of information and you're putting it together and finding your truth in it. But like Dr. Boutte said, if it's indoctrination, it's us following the script that was given to us to teach, because that's essentially teaching. There's nothing autonomous about teaching. They tell you when you need to teach it, when you need to teach it by. We're now falling into a phase where the curriculum is laid out for you day by day. Like teach this day one, teach this day two, to where we're we're the agent and we're getting the heat, but it goes way above us, because when it comes on the totem pole of making decisions and having power, teachers are under parents and right above students.
I think those are fabulous, seriously fabulous points. And I agree with everything both of you ladies have said. I teach even my fifth graders that history is written by the victors. Like everything you read in every book, science or history, is skewed. And you have to have enough ability to critically think to understand that and to look at science and history as an entire thing instead of one view. And I think what I'm seeing and what I think a lot of us are seeing is that culturally, as a society, we are losing our critical thinking skills. Adults are, kids are, and so as adults who have maybe lost some of those critical analytical skills and thinking of their own, we're letting personal beliefs trump the ability to think critically. And so just because you believe something, you're afraid that by teaching a child to think critically about something, that your belief would be wrong, that it automatically denies your belief. And they should not be, exclusive of each other. You can have your beliefs and be taught critically and critical thinking at the same time. So I think it's much bigger than education. It's society. It's the adults mainly who are doing a lot of the running away from analytical and critical thinking. And then they get very much afraid that the students will also be taught these very radical ways to think.
Like you, I tell my students in Germany, they're not telling the same story of World War II that we are spilling, because history in America, we are the great America. We are the great saviors. We are the great people who make the world the best place to be. And other countries are not teaching, oh, America came in and saved us. So it's all a matter of who Victor's writing it, who you're telling the story to, and whose voice is missing in that story.
And I would say this too. I agree with you. But you take the story of Germany, for example. I mean, the way history is taught, from what I understand from my German colleagues and scholars, is that they do share the multiple perspectives, right? So, I mean, you don't see people honoring people who were following Hitler, right? They tell the story. Here's the story of Hitler. Here's the story of the Jewish people. those stories are told side by side, and you see that. So there's more than one perspective. Here in the U.S., we are afraid to hear the truth and to hear rounded, comprehensive stories. And at every historical point, there are multiple perspectives on what happened in that very same event. And children totally get this idea. They understand that you can, mom and dad and sister, different people have different perspectives. They get that. But we, you know, the powers to be who create the curriculum and the textbooks think apparently, as Katie said, that, children are not capable of thinking critically and processing this information.
Right.
And
We
they
lower our
certainly are.
expectations of our students. And just as a mom, like I remember telling my daughter's dad, just because she's a child doesn't mean she's not taking in information and conceptualizing it. Children know a lot more and they understand a lot more than we give them credit for.
And my point with Germany is that historically, if you're telling a story, if something that was done that was not right, which is beyond your control, you can still tell that this happened, and this is what we learn from. We learn from that history, so we don't repeat it. But when we deny that this existed, we continue the whole cycle.
Dr. King?
And then what I was just going to say, and kind of as a sidebar, but very related, and I think all of you will agree, if a child, regardless of the age, comes home with one catchphrase or term or something that is a little bit out of the ordinary, or maybe a hot button topic, rather than the adult calling the teacher or the principal or going to the school to address it, what do? They get on social media and they go on a rant, and then it goes viral. And the next thing you know, we're teaching that the Amazonian people are really from outer space and they don't really exist, and nobody landed on the moon, but nobody calls the source. And admittedly, I'm a prolific Facebooker. I like the social media aspect. I use it a lot, but I'm often surprised and sometimes appalled. And I will readily, and maybe I've gotten a little more open since I've been retired, to be a little more pointed. And I'll say, have you called the principal? Have you talked to your child's teacher? Have you reviewed the material yourself to see if it's historically relevant, if it's culturally relevant, if it's something that is age appropriate? Because more than likely, kind of like you said, Ms. Moultrie, 99.9% of the time it's scripted, and there's a pacing guide, and there's a curriculum that has to be taught and adhered to, and we're not swaying from that. So, for parents who are listening in right now, I encourage you, before you get on social media and get really upset about something somebody posted or something that's going on at school, call the school, contact the teacher. There are various methods by which to do that. I tried to be very available as a principal. Most principals are, and teachers definitely are tuned into their classes as well and can answer and potentially dissuade or make somebody feel comfortable about what's going on in the classroom.
And all of that information is accessible to parents. Like it's on district websites. And so before going to social media, check the website and see, like, why is this being taught? And I would go further than the school. Go to the district. Their board meetings every month, to where the issues that are addressed on social media, no parent is there. Well, there are some, but not enough parents who are making the complaints. They're not at the board meeting saying why. Ask the people. Again, teachers are very low on the totem pole. We can't say, well, so-and-so's parent doesn't like this, so I'm not going to teach that. Because when the district consultants come in and they're observing not the students, again, the weight goes on the teacher. Is she doing it this way? Is she doing it that way? Are all of the students engaged? And so our job is we have to make sure every student, regardless of if they like it or not, are engaged in the work that we're doing. And so we do what we know, and we just do the work. And so we take a lot of heat. We take a lot of heat for not just the school, for districts, for the state standards, whatever comes with it. The teacher is the villain. in it all.
And I like that point too, because part of what goes with, and this brings me back to the earlier point about indoctrination and how what's currently happening in schools is indoctrination. So teachers are following these pacing guides, and some of those pacing guides and some of the curriculum that has been put together, and even some of the textbooks that have been adopted, are inaccurate and or distorted. I mean, one example that comes to mind that I've seen over and over again across grade levels is the misteaching about people who were enslaved. There are textbooks out there that will say that African people were brought to this country to be workers. That is an inaccuracy. That's a distortion. And yet it's put in the curriculum for teachers to say. Now, if teachers were allowed to make professional decisions, and they should, they would like, okay, something's wrong with this. Let's research this. They would teach their students how to question, how to research. Is this accurate or not? When we say, when the powers to be who are trying to dismantle public schools say you cannot teach about, let's say, the 1619 project, or you cannot teach about XYZ. We should be able to teach about all of this and teach students how to critically evaluate and process whatever they're learning.
Right. I think the fear comes in. There's this idea that if you teach those truths, you're indoctrinated to teach individuals to, quote, hate America, for, say, white people to feel guilty, as if that's the intent. And that's where all the focus kind of goes on to. But honestly, I've always seen one of the strengths that I hope our country can be is a place where we can bring multiple perspectives in. And when you resist that, then to me, that's the problem. To me, that should be anti-American when you resist that true freedom of discussion. Just an example too, it's always bewildered me, talk about indoctrination, the gymnastics it must take to convince us that Columbus, quote, discovered America, just as the obvious, has a slogan. I guess in 1492 sailed the ocean blue. It's like, well, it rhymes, let's go with it. And there are people here 30,000 years prior to that. What's more indoctrination, that some guy discovered it 500 years ago?
Yeah. If people, again, this is our job as educators, to teach our students to be critically conscious. So when they grow up to be adults, and they're the people who are processing this, they can say, wait, this doesn't make sense,
Right.
to question those kinds of things.
And we can talk about Columbus
I
as
do
a
want to say
great
one
sailor.
thing about the discomfort of white people, because that's been, this is a subtext of a lot of the movements, particularly the anti-CRT movement, is, protecting white students. And white children handle this information quite well, by the way. I've taught white children history in truthful ways. They handle it, and they understand that there are different perspectives on historical events. They totally get that, right? At the same time, this whole this whole anti-CRT movement that happened and is still happening, I think we don't need to underestimate the power of that. All but 7 states had bills to try to prohibit the teaching of what they conceived as the critical race theory, right?
Dr. Boucher,
Right.
can I just say, like,
They're teaching
I've
the
had
children.
that.
I wanted to say one more thing. So, the whole idea of protecting children of color never comes up. Children of color are uncomfortable in schools most of the time. Imagine being told that your ancestors who came to this country in 1619 and before, who have worked really hard, who were brought here against their will, that they were workers. Imagine not being told the truth, or that their history began with enslavement. Imagine, children from, Mexican American kids coming to this country and not learning that 1/3 of the U.S. was Mexico and that it displaced. Just the histories that are not told. That is not who we are as a country. That's not who
Right.
we are as a democracy.
And it seems like some of the anti-CRT push is to try to jump over that truth part to get to the reconciliation, and you got to go through the truth to get to reconciliation.
Exactly. But the biggest thing is, like Dr. Boucher said, other races have been uncomfortable for years with the curriculum that's been acceptable for years. My parents, my parents for sure, probably their parents have watched Roots in school, where a class full of African Americans had to watch enslaved Black people beat and worked, and it was never a question of are they comfortable watching this. I went to middle school with a young lady who was from Africa, and immature, the level of maturity maybe wasn't there, but she was uncomfortable knowing she was from Africa, like fresh a year, an immigrant, and we had to watch Roots, and no one said, oh, those children in that predominantly African American school might be uncomfortable learning about slaves and learning that they were brought over here and inspected like a horse, and that's their history. It starts there. It's there, not that they were kings and queens and
Right.
bringing over all of these cultural aspects that we use today from Africa. And so no, I think the comfort level of the white race, I'm just it's just astonishing me that that's where the issue is, when there's been, again, like Dr. Busek said, Mexicans who've been uncomfortable for years, feeling like we're immigrants in a place that we were the natives.
Right.
Christopher Columbus cannot move to a place and find it when you've already, no one can move in your house and say, I discovered this house.
I found you. Yes.
But
You're welcome.
I also, just to reiterate what Dr. Boutte said, and I vehemently agree. I'm using the word vehement a lot. It's sometimes it can sound negative. I don't mean it negatively, but it is so incumbent upon our teachers to convey that our children need to be critical thinkers, and they need to be open-minded, and they need to learn the unadulterated version of our country's history. I'm all for that. I think it's wrong if we try to shield or hide pieces of our history. I have grown children of my own, and I have striven throughout their life to make them critical thinkers. Question the mainstream. Question everything. The more you question, the more you learn. The more you research, the more you learn. And critical thinking is so important. And I hope, as in such a sad state of affairs that our teaching cadre is right now throughout the country and maybe other countries as well, that our teachers don't stop encouraging critical thinking and hard research. But I think sometimes, because of the extremes that we have out there in the political factions, that our teachers is like one more hammer that's coming down on them. Oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble if I encourage my kids to think critically? It hurts my heart to think that our teachers are holding back and not given the latitude to give our children everything they need to be critical thinkers.
And
I agree 100%.
I definitely think we're seeing a generation of adults who were raised in schools where they were taught partial history and they were indoctrinated with this information. And so when now they're hearing their children are being taught something different than what they believe to be true, or has been taught since they were children to believe to be true, there is that fear, that disconnect that adults are feeling about their children having critical thinking skills. And I think if the communication between teachers and parents, if there's a way to build that back so that teachers can explain, I don't think anyone disagrees with the idea of kids thinking critically. I think it's a fear of a lot of adults that what they have been taught their life may or may not be accurate. And admitting
them thinking differently.
Yes.
Like, so it's not, everybody wants their child to be a critical thinker. They can analyze, but it's when their truth differs from the mainstream that it starts to become a problem, because now this child is thinking for themselves and it's not the norm. And so who taught you that? And that's where the issue comes in.
And one of the dangers right now with the attack on, quote, critical race theory, that a lot of the proponents against it came out, is their goal was to take that term, critical race theory, and in their own terms, I think they said they want to decodify what it actually means, which is a very specific thing taught in law school, and recodify, which is redefine it in a way that if anything makes anyone uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, they can say, oh, this is that critical race thing happening right here, and we can't have that. And then pull out some scary examples from the boogeyman somewhere and say, this is why we have to say whatever, and there you go. And then the harm from that is you can't critically think, because there's a talking about trust. Some of the issues in our society is we have a divided society. And I think the only safe way to go about dealing with that is there isn't some magical box of objectivity we can just pull out from somewhere and say, everyone agrees on this, we're only going to teach this. Arithmetic gets brought up. We need to teach arithmetic. When's the last time they actually taught? I don't know why they go to that term arithmetic all the time. We need more arithmetic in schools, but whatever. Or we just need to teach reading. I'm like, well, what are they going to read that isn't biased in some way, shape, or form? So let's just deal with it. There's going to be biases. Let's teach openly about biases and deliver these ways of learning how to learn, which is what we need to be teaching in schools, and get educators' voices helping shape these curriculums. Because you brought up a wonderful point about showing roots in school as far as how to do that in curriculum. We need to have more Black excellence, more Hispanic excellence of these
That's
things
right.
taught in schools that tell where the story didn't just start with slavery, it started beyond then. Because we don't talk about cultural relevancy enough, and then the only time we do is in these very
And school should be the safe place for all of those conversations.
And the other thing
it should
too,
be.
I mean, Pete, let's just name this as well. So this whole movement about anti-critical race theory is manufactured, because if you do a content analysis of curriculum from preschool to 12th grade, you will find that 80 to 85% of the content is about European and European history, culture, science, every across the area. So this whole fear, that culturally relevant teaching is taken over is problematic, because it's not real. It's not realized even in the teacher education programs. The theorists that people study, the nature of the research, it's all Eurocentric. It's a manufactured problem to scare people. And it does scare teachers, by the way. We're losing teachers. Teachers are afraid to teach. So it's doing what it's intended to do. But there's no problem in the schools with us being anywhere near actually teaching in a way that is democratized, where all voices are heard. We're nowhere near that.
Right.
And Dr. Boutte, I guess one thing that's a little bit disconcerting and regretful to say is there is a faction of folks out there who are okay with it being Eurocentric, and they're fine with that. And
You're right, and that's the goal.
And I'm my 60-year-old white guy, and I'm not. I say our history needs to be taught in an age-appropriate, proper vernacular, but in an unadulterated way. Kind of like Pete said, we shouldn't. I don't feel like we need to shield our children from the truth and how things were and how our history transpired. I don't know how anybody can be against that, to be honest with you. But like you also said, you inferred is everybody wants to convolute it and call it CRT when it's not that. It's teaching of history, true history.
I think what you named is so powerful, that the powers to be and the people who are manufacturing this actually want schools to be heavily Eurocentric. They're comfortable with that. And so the protest is really against the possibility of us democratizing curriculum. That's a threat.
And it's also quite a distraction from actual educational problems we have. It's a hot topic. It's something to bring up instead of talking about the lack of funding, the lack of equity, the teacher retention problems we have. Let's talk about this issue.
Non-existing thing.
Right. And let's make that the focus of why schools are not doing what they need to do instead of all the real actual problems we have.
Yes.
And also the intent, you all, let's not forget this. An intent is to divert public monies to private schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then we understand that when that happens, children of color, children in poverty, and other minoritized groups are going to be the ones who are excluded or left with whatever the remains are.
with even less funding than currently goes in that
Because
direction.
I tell my students that the society is set up so that there are always classism. There's always going to be, and I have to tell them sometimes you have to take yourself, your growing, your critical thinking where you want to be. It has to be most important to you because the world needs more workers, and so sometimes what we're required to put out to you, we're not here to groom people to go above the working class. The world doesn't need a top tier that is heavy. We need a heavy working class. And so sometimes curriculum, sometimes education, sometimes everything feeds into that narrative where the world needs workers. We will always need workers. We will never, I have to tell my, like, classism has existed for ever. There's always been a social pyramid, and we're a long way from that ever not being a thing.
And that's very important to name that too, to name the role of capitalism in schools. At the same time, it's totally okay to have educated workers, critically conscious workers, by the way.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be a dichotomy there, that
Oh
either
no. I could,
No, I
because
know you're not.
everybody
I know
doesn't.
you're not saying that, but I'm saying I'm speaking to the powers that be. I mean, so don't worry. You'll still have your workers, but they will be critically conscious. In fact, will help your company produce better. Okay, in the long run, because you got thinkers.
Right.
Well, to that point too, if you really, I think in a capitalist society too, having smart, sharp thinkers is only going to produce better capital in everywhere, shape, or form. For it to really work, you need to have intelligent people, not to be manipulated by someone else. So it's a win-win, whatever situation you're in there. We're about to run out of time here, and kind of want to leave it on a positive note, not just talking about the issues. And I think we've already mentioned some of the solutions. But if we give everybody just kind of final word on solution, and one thing that is helpful for me to recognize, and I think Shaquetta, you mentioned this too, is you the individuals who are against teaching truth in school. It's helpful for me to realize that they were taught something in school and they believe what they were taught were truth. Some things like slavery wasn't really that bad, and many of the slaves preferred to be slaves even when they were set free. And this was in like textbooks in a lot of the baby boomer generation that they learned in school. And so that's sitting on them, that that's what they learned and have been absorbed in their whole life. So it helps me to realize that's where they're coming from. Um, as far as when I start conversations with those individuals about what maybe will help me to convey the truth to them. And so my approach is to approach it, stand by my truth, but and be as compassionate as possible, because some people just love a fight, and I'm not just going to give them a fight. So that's my technique. But I think every individual needs to come at it in his or her their own way at how to confront this. So if y'all would share some of y'all solutions to this to wrap this up, how do we combat extreme radical misinformation?
I would say recognize that education is under attack, and therefore democracy is under attack. So don't go at this alone. This is my advice. Network with others, join and become active with SCEA and other national organizations and movements. Organize, advocate for ourselves. And don't forget, as educators, we are amazing.
Yeah. I think 100% teachers need to, and teachers and parents need to vote with education as their main priority this election, or any election for that matter. We tend to vote education's like third or fourth down the list of important things. And if it aligns with all the other beliefs, then we're good to vote for someone. But I really think if we want to see change in the state level, we're going to have to start voting for some change. And we're going to have to, as educators, trust, at least I have to trust that what I am teaching my kids is going to make this world a better place. That the energy I'm putting in and the critical thinking skills that I'm trying to instill in these kids will then lead itself to a generation of better thinkers, more open-mindedness than what we maybe currently have right now.
I would say I'm gonna agree with Katie and Dr. Boutte, of course, but like definitely as educators, keep fighting, keep doing the work that you've been doing, but also be aware of what's going on, because a lot of times policies are put into place and you're not aware of it. So you don't vote on it. You don't know when the vote is there. So being aware of what's going on. Once I became a teacher, I would get I forget who sends them, but I would get emails on this vote is going down this day and this is what it's about. But everybody's not getting that. Before I was a history teacher, I was not getting certain information. And so the misinformation or the lack of information, people aren't voting. They don't even know what to or when or why to vote for. They just kind of go with, sometimes you get there, and even those who do vote, they get on the ballot and they just press something, not being aware of what that vote is actually saying is going to happen. And so then these policies come into place and they say, well, why is that happening? Well, that's what the majority voted for, but they haven't gotten the information to even be educated enough to know exactly what they did vote for. So educate yourselves, be aware, get in the know as best you can.
And I saw someone ask earlier the tens of thousands of teachers who are unregistered to vote. And Dr. Boutte, you may have said this at the very beginning, but we have tens of thousands of teachers who are registered to vote who do not vote either. Please, teachers, educators, vote, exercise that right. It is by far the most important thing you can do in the way of advocating for public education is to serve your own self-interest by voting, and vote for those folks who still believe like I do, and like the folks on this panel, that we have some of the most fantastic, dedicated, in it for the right reasons teachers. And I have been so honored and privileged to work with so many teachers over the years, learn from them myself growing up, and as an administrator, as a teacher myself. We have so many educators who are so in it for the right reasons and want to do what's right for their children. And be more vocal, speak out, reach out to the politicians, reach out to the local boards, reach out to your administration. If you've got concerns, don't let it fester and don't let it stress you out. Teachers have enough of that already. Look out for yourself, but stay the course, because you are teaching our future. You are the ones who create all professions, and I believe vehemently in our teachers.
Thank you. Just to wrap it up, wonderful conclusion comments from everyone there, and I think that resonates too, is that educators, you are not alone out there in this. The truth shines. The truth does shine. I think Dr. King summarized the arc of the moral universe is long, but bends towards justice. It bends towards justice when we collectively stand up and share the truth. For me personally, seeing how many ruts in our past perpetuate to cause problems in the present, and until we educate that these are the problems, we'll keep dealing with these same problems in terms of things with issues of racism and injustice and all that. And I want to believe that the great hope of America is to overcome these things, to live up to that great creed. That's my hope, as you said, to protect that democracy. And and I don't want to let the attack on critical race theory stop the need to shine a spotlight that the systems that perpetuate racism are a problem. That's dear to me, to get that out there. That's the only way we're going to heal up and become stronger and do right. That's important. And one other thing, if you are interested in public education, it's how you vote. Get registered to vote. I'm just going to put this plug out there. If you care about public education, I would vote for Lisa Ellis. I'm voting for Lisa Ellis. Full disclosure there. She's a strong supporter of public education. She's a current teacher. That's why I'm so excited to have a current educator currently in the classroom running for that position. Means so much to me as an educator, with the changes she can help see that are meaningful changes, not just to check boxes to make people who don't know what's going on feel better.
October 9th is the last day to register, just FYI. October 9th.
October 9th. Thank y'all all so much, panelists, for coming on here. Y'all are phenomenal. Blessings and miracles beyond comprehension for what you do to make this world a better place. And I think we all want to go in there and help students become the best version of who they are. And that's our goal at the end of the day, not to indoctrinate anyone other than to be yourself with confidence and to be kind and compassionate to others. That's what the goal is as well. So thank y'all. Anybody got any last final words you want to say? All right. Thank you very much. Sign up the SCEA, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Pete. I just want to stop and thank, first of all, thanks to all of our guests for their time tonight. Pete, thank you for putting this together, for taking over Rick's work, and I look forward. I know a lot of us are looking forward to, future live streams like this. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Awesome.
And we want to make sure that everybody knows that, like, Pete is a member of the SCEA. If you're a member of the SCEA, we're member led. And if you're interested in doing work like this, he's done some brilliant videos. If you're interested in doing writing blog posts, doing a podcast, anything like that, you can reach out to me, toddschul@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to help
y'all
you.
Know something about too. The SCEA, in opinion, is so supportive of its members. Tremendously so. So thank y'all for all you do.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Just a couple quick reminders as we get ready to sign off. If you are not a registered to vote, or if you need voting information, you can go to the scea.org/votes. We would love for you to connect with us. If you're not currently a member or not currently connected to the SCEA, just head on over to the scea.org/connect. Fill out the form. We'll connect with you. No pressure there. We would love to have you join our movement. You can see scrolling at the bottom of the screen is a link, join the scea.org if you're interested in joining. You can also text the word join to 48744, and that you can do that right on your phone and join us today. We'd love to have you in our movement. My website, the Center for Educator Wellness and Learning, that is sponsoring these live streams, along with the SCEA. You can learn more about us. You'll find this video on there probably tomorrow. And the full, if you tuned in late, the full thing will be on there tomorrow at cool.us, that's CEWL.us. And one quick little promo, we are going to do another cool ideas session called Sustainable Education Models with two educators from the Floyd, Virginia area. It's a small rural town in Virginia. We're going to talk to Jenny Finn, who is the executive director of Springhouse Community School, and Tammy Sarver, who's the executive director of Blue Mountain School, and just learn about some interesting other ways that folks are educating kids. And I think you'll find that particularly interesting. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in tonight, who's watching, including those who had some critical comments. There's some folks out there making some comments, and we appreciate you tuning in and having an open mind to listen tonight. And we'll just encourage any of you who are struggling with some of the content tonight. Maybe you have some pushback. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to have conversations with you. And for those members of the SCEA and folks in the education community who are supportive and had supportive comments, thank you too so much for tuning in tonight. Again, thanks to Pete Stone for doing a wonderful job coordinating tonight's event, and hopefully we will see you at the next one. Again, that is coming up. I didn't say when it was. It's next Wednesday, August 31st, 7 o'clock. From 7 to 8 o'clock, we're going to have that particular next event for you. So I hope you've all had a wonderful start to the year. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of the SCEA. And if there's anything we can do to support you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to support you in your journey this year. We wish you and your students nothing but the best. Have a great night, everybody.